Welcome to the hottest show on the block when you talk about recapping an Alabama football game on a Sunday. We got the three baddest men in the building representing Touchdown Alabama Magazine, the BAMA Elite Podcast right here on YouTube. We got Justin Smith, the lead scouting and recruiting analyst for TDA. Patrick Dow, breaking news reporter for TDA. Yours truly, Stephen M. Smith, Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Before we get started, people, if you can't catch us right here on the Bama Elite, you know what to do. You check out the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream for all of the big-time college football coverage here in the South. Check out the Big Game College Football Podcast Network. Also, shout out to our sponsors, man, Prize Picks. Prize Picks, those guys have done an unbelievable job. Fantasy football, you can play it all around the board, all around the spectrum, fantasy sports, using that code BAMA100. Get yourself there right now. Our good people there at Prize Picks. But to start this thing off, Pat, how you feeling, man, after the loss to Tennessee? A better defensive showing from Alabama against Mississippi State, despite not getting the shutout.
Yeah, no, I would say it's a bit of a night and day defensive performance for Alabama. Last week against Tennessee, obviously one of their more rough performances, but they turned in a good outing against Mississippi State on Saturday. And look, even with a lot of the improvements on defense, there's still some things on offense that I think that need to be addressed. So I think all in all, Alabama's pretty happy to go to the bye week with how they look right now.
How you feeling over there, Justin? I mean, what did you think about the game from your end on homecoming against Mississippi State?
Well, I think we definitely saw some growth out of Alabama's defense, specifically their secondary. Finally, got an opportunity to see Eli Ricks. Like Pat said, still some things to work on the offensive side of football. So I think Alabama's in a better position than they were last week. Of course, I definitely saw some things that I liked out of the Crimson Tide's defense on Saturday night.
So let's start right there then with Eli Ricks. He got the start at corner, taking over for Terrion Arnold, getting that job opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry. And from the first snap, Eli Ricks was ready. 4 pass breakups. The defensive secondary as a whole, I think, had 15 pass breakups. Eli Ricks had 4 or 5 of those, getting his hands in, ripping the ball away from wide receivers, getting his head turned around, playing the ball with precision. He was just blanketing guys. He gave up 1 catch, but the dude was blanketing guys. You could just feel his energy after every single pass breakup. He got up screaming. He got up making faces. He got up animated. He got up like he wanted to be out there. And now expressing that, knowing that this was his time, and took full advantage there of the moment. And Justin, I remember talking to you, and you mentioned to us about how he's just perfectly sound in that technique, knowing when to turn his head, play the ball, play the receiver, be physical, and have the energy that is needed and necessary for this Alabama defense, especially in the secondary. I know it was his first game, but it was against an SEC opponent that was going to challenge you throwing the football like Mississippi State, Mike Leach, and Will Rogers did there. But what impressed you about Justin, the energy from Eli Ricks, but just his performance clamping on wide receivers?
His energy definitely looked contagious to Alabama's entire defense in terms of what he brought to the table once he got on the field. But like I said before he got on the field, just talking about why and discussing why he hasn't played yet for Alabama previously. I know a lot of Alabama fans now are asking the question, why hasn't this kid been on the football field? Of course, you have to ask Nick Saban that question now, but in that matchup, I think you saw what we saw from Ricks out of him during his freshman season at LSU. He's a very technically sound defensive back. Like I said, consistently knows where the football is, and he is really confident. Like I said a lot of times, I think confidence is so important for defensive backs, specifically cornerbacks. He knows where he's at in every step of the play. So he knows how to time the football really well in terms of making those pass breakups, making sure he's in the best position not to be called for pass interference. And he has those long arms. It was one play, it looks as if the guy basically had possession of the football, but Ricks has those long arms, so he can keep his arms basically in between the guy's hands throughout the play almost. I think that is a benefit of his frame and his size. So he's just the perfect defensive back in terms of his frame, his size, those long arms, great technique, consistently, like I said, gets his head around to see the football. So I really like what I've seen out of Eli Ricks in his first performance for the Crimson Tide as a starter.
Yeah, and it was a heck of a first outing because, I mean, talk about getting thrown into the fire. Mississippi State threw the ball 60 times. So he got his fair share of targets during the game, and he really rose to the occasion. And I agree with you too, Justin. I saw that his energy was really contagious, especially on the back end with those guys, having that rough performance against Tennessee. But really, the whole defensive secondary really stepped up. Kool-Aid McKinstry had a good game. DeMarcco Hellams had a bit of a bounce-back performance after a rough one against Tennessee. So, yeah, look, I mean, only Nick Saban can answer why Eli Ricks wasn't playing from the get-go. But I do want to add Terrion Arnold was playing pretty well until recently. But, he's his length. He looks like the ideal Alabama corner. And look, he can make a serious impact here as he plays against his former team here in the next 2 weeks.
So, Pat, when you look at just how Ricks played and the energy, I mean, what does that do for the entire back five or back six of this Alabama secondary? Because it was like when Ricks got out there, Kool-Aid turned up, almost had a pick in the game, just could not finish the play. You mentioned DeMarcco Hellams. He had, 12, 13 tackles. He had a bounce-back performance. Brian Branch was everywhere, all over the field. Malachi Moore even had 2 to 3 pass breakups to his own credit. So when you have an Eli Ricks that has experience, finally getting this opportunity, he brings the energy, he brings the big play. I mean, how contagious is that for an entire back five, back six, watching a guy go out there and do that?
Well, it gives that whole secondary some much needed confidence after, again, we bring up the Tennessee game once again, but they really did get exposed during that game, especially through the air. And like Justin has mentioned, so much of a defensive back's identity has to do with their confidence and how they're playing throughout the game. And if Ricks is adding that, I mean, this is an Alabama defense that, has been in desperate need of that sort of confidence. And Nick Saban talks about having that competitive anxiety. They had anxiety against Tennessee. The one way to get rid of that is to have confidence as a full group. And I think Ricks added that to the defense.
Yeah, I think Ricks definitely added that fire. I think we saw a different type of fire specifically out of that secondary. A lot of those guys seem to be really juiced up, and they seem to have had a role in the way that they played and seem to have come a little bit from Eli Ricks. So yeah, I think like we said, confidence is very important. One guy has confidence specifically in the secondary. You do feel a lot better when you can lean on your teammate, and that's throughout the game of football really, but specifically in that secondary, how much they work together in terms of zone coverage and handing off guys, having great communication. So I think Ricks will be a great addition for Alabama moving forward, not only as a cornerback who can cover his man-to-man, one-on-one alone on the island, but he's also a guy I think is going to bring some energy consistently week in and week out, and I think the Crimson Tide secondary can draw off of that for sure.
Alabama guys had to dig into the depth there of his defensive line. Several players did not play in the matchup against the Bulldogs. Few guys that were in street clothes. Pat, you and I saw this in pregame, and DJ Dale did not play. Shaheem Otis did not play. Alabama dipped into a bit more of Jamil Burrows, a bit more of Tim Smith, a bit more of Damon Payne, a bit more of other guys. And Saban talked about how Alabama basically had one or two defensive linemen on the field at one time and had mostly just linebackers around those guys. So they had to play small ball a bit as a couple of guys nicked up, banged up there. There were no injuries that were divulged by Nick Saban in the press conference, but he is hopeful that he gets some guys back. Alabama can get some guys back as it's in the bye week right now for the week following against LSU on Saturday, November 5th. So hopefully, Pat, Alabama can get either a DJ Dale back or Jaheim Otis back. Kind of too close, too early to call right now, but Saban did touch on a couple of the guys that did not play against Mississippi State.
Yeah, and I think I noticed that Dale was wearing a walking boot out on the field afterwards. I didn't see Jaheim Otis wearing anything, any sorts of brace or anything like that. But, against a team like Mississippi State, this is kind of the only time when you can get away with only playing two defensive linemen at a time with a team that's going to throw the ball as much as they do. So they really either need to hope those guys get healthy quick or develop some more depth on that defensive line because it's starting to get pretty thin.
Yeah, I think those guys being out created a great opportunity for some younger guys, and also with them being out and having an opportunity to go into this bye week, definitely get rested up, including Bryce Young. So yeah, it felt good to see some of those young guys getting opportunity to make some plays. And another interesting part of Alabama's defense that sort of surprised me was Dallas Turner. He was playing inside linebacker, playing standing up. I don't think we've seen him in that particular position while being at Alabama, but we know he can play in space. It's one of his biggest strengths as an outside linebacker. So yeah, that really caught me by surprise seeing him playing standing up as an inside linebacker. I won't say he looked natural there, but he did not seem out of place. It seemed as if he could play that position if Alabama was to develop him there. But I really like what I've seen from Alabama's defense. They did rush 3 at times, but they definitely dialed up the pressure a lot more. A lot of different blitz packages that I was really impressed with.
What I saw on that, guys, was Bama played a lot of dime over the weekend, and you rarely see Bama in dime a whole lot. If Saban can nickel you to death, he will do that. But we saw a lot of dime, a lot of Malachi Moore and Brian Branch on the field together, and that's what allowed Alabama to kind of stop Mississippi State's run game a little bit. State was able to get some things on the ground. Bama goes to dime. You bring pressure with Brian Branch off the edge. That really helped. Malachi Moore seems, you could tell, he's a bit healthier now. He's able to clamp down more so in coverage. So I was impressed with, Saban going to dime, sticking with that a bit more, because that even made DeMarcco Hellams a bit more comfortable in that dime sort of look there, Justin.
Yeah, I really like what I saw from the different defensive sets. Like I said, the biggest thing that really stood out to me was how they were dialing up the pressure, sending Brian Branch, which I said they did that earlier in the game against Tennessee, but it seemed to just go away from it. And a large portion of that second half was just completely rushing 3 and dropping back 8. But it looked as if Pete Golden tried to lean more on the blitz packages that him and Saban could have basically put together over the last couple of weeks, and they were able to definitely show that against Mississippi State. Like I said, Branch, I don't think he has been this impactful as far as getting pressure on the quarterback in the past. I think this is one of his best games in terms of getting after the quarterback. They sent Malachi Moore on a couple of times, but I think he still has to grow in that area. Both guys have grown a lot, but I think Brian Branch is a little bit more of a better blitzer than Brian Branch is better than Malachi Moore at this point, and both of those guys' development. Sent Toto a couple of times, sent Moody when he was in the game. So yeah, I really like the way that they really dialed up the pressure to go along with their defensive game plan.
Yeah, I think dialing up the pressure was kind of pretty much based off of, Pete Golding realized, hey, we're covering today. We can cover these guys on the back end, so we can afford to send some extra pressure. And they were able, and on these obvious passing situations, whether it was 3rd and long or 3rd and medium, Pete Golding was able to dial up the blitz, and they were able to get home. I mean, even rushing long, they had 18 pressures on the day. And another impressive thing, they really got Mississippi State off the field. They were 7 of 22 on 3rd down, and 3 of 6 on 3rd. And they were able to pick up some of those on the ground, but when it really mattered, Mississippi State had a couple 3rd and 4th and shorts that they weren't able to get the first on. So, Alabama's defense, they really came up big when they had to.
Flipping this now, guys, to the offense, Coach Saban mentioning, going to be huge to have Bryce Young back 100% here over the bye week. Young starting in back-to-back games, junior quarterback, reigning Heisman Trophy winner after having the sprained AC joint to his throwing shoulder against Arkansas. And Young did some good things out there. 21 of 35 passes completed. Did have 2 touchdowns, one to JoJo Earl, where he directed so much traffic and guided Earl to the back of the end zone for that one. With a touchdown pass there to Trayshawn Holden. But having Bryce at 100% going into the LSU game and then Ole Miss and Auburn, it's going to be huge, Pat, especially for a young man that's trying to repeat as a Heisman Trophy winner if he's able to do that. But more so than that, trying to finish his career at Alabama as a national championship starting quarterback. This bye week could not have come at a better time for Bryce Young to get fully healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Alabama still has some things to figure out on offense, obviously. They had a really encouraging game against Tennessee offensively where Bryce Young was able to just look like Superman, putting up all these incredible throws, extending these plays. But, Mississippi State did a much better job of actually defending Alabama's offense this game. It was one of those strange games where Mississippi State had actually outgained Alabama. They outgained them 293 to 290. So there really wasn't much of moving the ball up and down the field, but Alabama was still won the game 30-6. So it was just a really strange outing in terms of the scoring. And, there's still a couple flaws in this Alabama offense. I thought the offensive line actually had a pretty decent game protecting Bryce Young, but in terms of the run game, those concerns that we all had earlier in the year flared back up where they really couldn't run the football against Mississippi State.
Yeah, the offense definitely struggled in the middle of that game. Yeah, I'll talk about the offense a little bit later here, but specifically Bryce Young, yeah, I think the Alabama would definitely benefit by getting him back healthy 100%. He looked pretty good over the last couple of weeks. It did not look like his shoulder bothered him at all. Like I said, when he's moving around, making defenders miss, it looks as if he's an older kid playing against some smaller kids in recess, the way he just moves around in the pocket and outside the pocket. But I think once he gets back healthy, fully healthy, I think he would definitely be great, just as good as he's been. But I think the biggest problems right now in terms of Alabama's offense is you could point your fingers at the play calling, because look at this past weekend, and look at last weekend. A lot of those plays Bryce Young made was off script. Those plays were not designed to do that. JoJo Earl's touchdown was basically off script. I think it was a deep pass to Ja'Cory Brooks early in the game. It was off script. A lot of plays that Bryce Young is making is a bit off script, and Alabama's defense stalled out a lot in the third quarter. And fortunately for us, in the watch party, ESPN was like showing us that angle where they sit behind the quarterback and we get to see the different route combinations. And those route combinations were not working at all especially throughout the third quarter. We was like, yo, what type of route combination? They were very bland, like look as if like a post dig route. A lot of them was like a lot of deep routes that took a long time to develop, which is why Bryce Young had to hold on to the football. It's like I've always not been the guy to criticize Bill O'Brien's play calling, but those route combinations were definitely not working. You do have to give some credit to Mississippi State as well. They defended it very well. So that is why Bryce Young was holding on to the football, not being comfortable passing the football, and that's why he held on to it and tried to make some plays off script. So yeah, on the offensive side of football, I think the Crimson Tide definitely have some things to work on in terms of their pass game, and it is pretty late in the season, so we'll see if they can turn that around as they continue to try to look for a wide receiver 1 or 2, but it seems it's going to continue to be on wide receiver by committee. And I think slowly Bill O'Brien is getting back to his old ways in a way. I think he's slowly just going away from the run game a little bit. Looks as if he's slowly starting to abandon it a little bit more and more each game, like we saw a lot towards the end of last season. Like in that last game against Mississippi State, it got to the point where I felt like Alabama was passing on first down, running it on second down. They only get 2 or 3 yards. They're looking at 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7. Like it was almost like clockwork how fast it happened. You pass the football, it was an incomplete pass. They ran it on second down. It was 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 7 before we knew it. He came out with the 5 wide receiver set. It seemed to happen like 2 or 3 drives happen like that, back to back. So yeah, I think Alabama definitely has some things to work on the offensive side of football.
Well, folks, as always, if you can't catch us here, the BAMA Elite on Sundays and Thursdays, Touchdown Alabama Magazine, you got to check out the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream for the best college football coverage in the South. Also, check out our guys at Prize Picks. They do an unbelievable job. Fantasy sports, you can't get it anywhere else, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, esports. You got to check them out there. Prize Picks, using that code BAMA100 in terms of our end. You look at Alabama football. But, guys, there's a lot of conversation in the chat right now about where was Seth McLaughlin? I understand Darian Dalcourt got the start at center. Did a pretty decent job, but a lot of fans are like, Seth McLaughlin has shown he's better, he's more physical, better run blocker, offensive line plays better when he's out there. Where was 56 in a game where Saban said afterwards, we couldn't run the football the way we wanted to kind of take the air out of the ball and close the game down? Well, because of that, a lot of people are asking the question, where was Seth McLaughlin? Now, once again, that goes back to something Justin said. You got to ask Nick Saban about that question right there. But, Justin, no Seth McLaughlin out there in a game where if you want to close the game down and be able to run the football, he's kind of that guy you want to have in the middle there.
Yeah, he's definitely a mauler on the offensive line, Seth McLaughlin. It looks as if he's having highlight plays when he's opening up holes for running backs. And we pointed out, it's easy to see the holes that he is able to create. I definitely feel at this point in his development, he's a better run blocker than Darian Dalcourt. Although Dalcourt did have some moments in this past game against Mississippi State, I just feel Alabama has that 1A and 1B at the center. They feel confident in both guys. There's no telling which guy we would see week in and week out. But I thought Alabama did not run the football well, but I didn't think it was awful at times. I felt like a lot of times, like I said earlier, I think Bill O'Brien is just slowly creeping back into his old ways, trying to abandon the run game. It was specifically one drive. It was in the second half. I'm not sure which quarter it was, but Alabama was getting up the field in the run game. I think Jahmyr Gibbs had a first down. Jason McClellan had a first down. And next thing we know, Alabama starts passing the football. They look up, it's like 2nd and 25 or like 3rd and 25. They're like behind the sticks really quickly because they just stopped running the football. So I just really feel if they lean on the run game a little bit more when they are having some success in it, I think that would be beneficial. Although we know the game has changed. Everyone likes to throw the football around. But I still feel running the football is still very effective. And I think Alabama has talented running backs. We talked about it a lot earlier in the season that Alabama has a talented running back room. Early in the season, we thought we could be possibly having a great discussion at this point that Jason McClellan and Jahmyr Gibbs were the best running back duo in the country. But unfortunately, we can't even see that possibly come to the forefront. So I definitely feel if Alabama has a run game, it can be just beneficial to their team as the pass game continues to try to put it together. Like we're still trying to see if they will have a top wide receiver, if they can consistently pass the football and consistently be effective on passing the football. I just think running game would be Bryce Young. Bryce Young's best friend is every quarterback's best friend. So I think having a run game would definitely be beneficial to Alabama, a more consistent one because Jahmyr Gibbs has gotten better and better each weekend. This past week, it seems as if he did not get an opportunity to do much.
Yeah, I'm with you a little bit on it because, well, first of all, with Darren Dalcourt, I'm with you on in terms of, they have 1A, 1B, and, Seth McLaughlin has proven to be a really good run blocker. I think Dalcourt actually had a really good block on Jahmyr Gibbs' 19-yard touchdown run. But mentioning that 19-yard run, Jahmyr Gibbs had 37 total yards. 19 of those came on one rush. And he had 9 other carries that didn't go for anything. Jason McClellan had 6 carries for 9 yards. Roydell Williams, 6 carries for 7 yards. And it's not like they were just running up the middle at all. They were running some stretch plays, trying to get to the outside. So they were kind of trying things. They ran the ball a decent bit, but when you see numbers like that, it does get discouraging, which does lead to a lot of these pass-happy plays. And like you're mentioning before, they ran a lot. They didn't run very interesting sets in terms of their routes and a lot of long developing plays. So it was kind of, I think all in all, maybe just get a little bit more creative in all aspects of the offense. That probably might fix things for Alabama.
Well, one thing we can say, guys, is Tyler Harrell is alive. He is not an urban myth. He is actually on this Alabama football team. Harrell made his first catch of a season as an Alabama receiver in his debut over the weekend. A 12-yard catch there from Jalen Milroe took place in the fourth quarter. So as he continues to develop and heal up and get healthy and grow within this offense, we could see Alabama go more to Harrell in the games that come down the stretch. But it was good, Pat, that, hey, number 8 is not a myth. He got on the field in the second half, did have a catch there.
Yeah, I know it was great to see him out there. I know he's been battling some injuries and just getting ingratiated into the Alabama system here. But, hey, look, 8th time's the charm and trying for Alabama, trying to find someone who could be their number 1. So maybe it's Tyler Harrell. Maybe we'll see. Maybe he emerges after this bye week. This is the last hurdle he needs to cross. But if I was a betting man, if I was going to put money on it, I would lean again. This is probably going to be a wide receiver room by committee for Alabama. But it's great to see Tyler Harrell back out there and healthy.
Appreciate the man Mark Bars here dropping in that $10 donation to the Super Chats. Mark Bars showing love here too. The BAMA Elite every Sunday and Thursday right here on Touchdown Alabama Magazine's YouTube channel here. Just a thought actually comes in from Dexter Wright, who says Hellams is playing middle linebacker and 2 safety positions. Give him his roses. So Dexter Wright showing some love here to one DeMarcco Hitman Hellams, who had his bounce back performance against Mississippi State.
Yeah, I really like what I see now. DeMarcco Hellams coming down and help and run support, being a physical safety. I think that is his trademark as far as his skill set goes. But unfortunately, I have to point out, I think that is what Tennessee took advantage of. They know he liked to come down and make big hits. He wants to help and run support. He wants to make big plays underneath. And I think his eyes was a bit downfield in that matchup. And I think Tennessee throw some things in front of him and got behind him, unfortunately. But he looked really good Saturday night, not taking anything away from that performance. That definitely was a great way for him to respond. And hopefully he learned from that matchup against Tennessee and he continues to grow, because I am a big fan of players continuing to grow. They may have a bad game. They are still college kids. They can make some improvements and continue to get better. But yeah, he looked really, really good. But like I said, I think Tennessee really exploited that in that last matchup.
Well, guys, the people are feeling the Bama Elite podcast. It's Eric Beasley. Come on down with that $10 donation in the Super Chats. Eric Beasley helping us out here on the show. All donations welcome. Also, hit that like button right there on the YouTube channel. Get those likes up here for the Bama Elite podcast, making this your Sunday and Thursday spot right here. But talk Crimson Tide football with Justin Smith, lead scout and recruiting analyst for TDA. My man Patrick Dowd here, breaking news reporter for TDA. Yours truly, Stephen M. Smith. Head on over to our guys at Prize Picks. Get your fantasy football on right there using that code BAMA100. Our guys over there at Prize Picks. But getting back to the receivers, we talked about this. Could be receiver by committee. Could be Tyler Harrell's time. Who knows? But another game where, Justin, Ja'Cory Brooks flashed again. He flashed again there. We saw, JoJo Earl continuing to work back from the foot fracture he had in the preseason during the fall camp there. He gets his second touchdown catch there of the year. Trayshawn Holden, no touchdown catch on his end. Isaiah Bond still getting used out there. Didn't hear much from Kobe Prentice. He had a couple of catches, but not a whole lot. 11 guys caught at least one pass, but I guess it's just, I know Saban mentioned receivers are playing better. They're improving, but is it kind of hard to say if they're improving if you're still not seeing a guy or a couple of guys pecking out a bit? Not trying to say Nick Saban's words are invalid, absolutely not. But he's saying they're improving, but we're just still not seeing the overall consistency there, Justin. Am I off base there? Explain that one for me.
Yeah, I think consistency is very important. When you just take a look at Alabama's wide receiver core, I think it's only one thing that's been consistent about them is that they have been inconsistent, and they have in the fact that they basically have been wide receiver by committee. The perfect example was last night. Like you say, 11 guys had more than one reception. And not only does Alabama not have a guy who has proven he's the number one guy or the number two guy for the Crimson Tide, I feel that the Crimson Tide's coaching staff is not confident in one or two guys, because I don't think Alabama has ever had this deep of a wide receiver rotation. I think 6 guys right now are in that rotation. Isaiah Bond, Kobe Prentice, Jermaine Burton, Trayshawn Holden, JoJo Earl. Like, all those guys are inside that rotation. And we're still waiting for another guy to probably emerge in that rotation, because we talk about Tyler Harrell and possibly just looking down the line if Aaron Anderson can possibly make an impact later in his freshman season there, or if he will possibly not get an opportunity. So I just think this is going to continue to be what Pat said, wide receiver by committee. It's kind of hard to say that we're going to see one guy jump off the screen. Like I said, I think Ja'Cory Brooks has the potential to do it, the skill set. I think he's one of the better route runners. He has a great catch radius, seems to have a decent level of chemistry with Bryce Young compared to some of the other guys in Alabama's wide receiver room right now. I think that came to the forefront when Bryce Young had to make that play off script. I think Ja'Cory Brooks just basically turned his route around, went upfield where nobody was at, and Bryce Young was able to hit him. So Alabama's wide receiver room, I think, continues to be a mystery. I think right now, like I said, those 5 or 6 guys are over 200 yards. I think Ja'Cory Brooks is the only guy over 300 yards. So yeah, we're probably just going to have to continue to wait to see if somebody emerges, but I can't go out on a limb and say one guy will. I just think it'll continue to be wide receiver by committee. One guy may step up here and there.
Yeah, having that room be a mystery and also thrown into the pass catching realm. Cameron Latu can throw another guy who can catch passes for Alabama. That tight end room, which they, inconsistently as well utilized throughout this season so far. But like I've mentioned this before, it's a headache for teams to prepare for a wide receiver group that's this deep and that has this deep of a rotation. But for Alabama, it's probably frustrating in terms of these late game situations, especially with Bryce Young. Who's that guy you trust to get that first down? Last year, hey, if it's 3rd and 7, we got to have it. John Mechie's right there, or Jameson Williams is right there, taking both the safeties over the top, so someone's wide open in the middle. So, and here's another. I was just thinking about this. When was the last time Alabama had a 100-yard receiver like this, like in a game? Like, has it happened? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Ja'Cory Brooks had it against Vanderbilt.
Against Vanderbilt, okay. Yeah, well, even then, I don't think that there's those kinds of performances have been few and far between. But, as a group, like they have a lot of guys that have over 200 receiving yards. But as of right now, like we've said, and we're gonna beat this phrase to death: wide receiver room by committee. That's what it's just gonna look like for the foreseeable future right now.
And yeah, if I could just jump in right quick, and I think this also just has these guys are. I think this is a bit of a young wide receiver room too, so I think it will get better with time and years to come. And I also think it's unfortunate for them, but they came to Alabama, and what the wideouts were able to create in Tuscaloosa is basically legendary. The Jalen Waddles, the Henry Ruggs, Jerry Judy's, all of those guys are special. First round draft picks, Jameson Williams, John Mechie even went in the 2nd round. I think those guys are talented, and that's just the culture at Alabama. You're going to come after legendary players.
It's an unbelievable run. Sometimes you are reminding me too to check myself a little bit in terms of this. It's an unbelievable run. It's an unbelievable standard to have that many just like top tier first round NFL draft picks on like in the series of like year after year after year. It was like 3 or 4 years in a row. They had like multiple first round picks at wide receiver. It really was insane. So I do need to check myself a little bit, and maybe this in terms of like necessarily criticizing this current group of Alabama receivers.
Of course, we got Michael White here who writes in, what happened to Amari Niblack after he called touchdown pass earlier in the season? And Coach Saban mentioned that Niblack was one guy that Bama was trying to get worked in. I think tight ends coach Joe Cox wants him to develop as a full tight end, not just as a pass catching option, but also a blocking option. I think Alabama's also trying to get some weight on Amari Niblack. He came in at Justin, 225. So they're trying to get some more weight on him, having him be physical, sustain at the point of attack there. So that could be what the issue is with Niblack. Is very talented, runs good routes, is a receiver like in a tight end's body. They're just trying to get some weight added to him and probably trying to get him to mature as a blocker as well, Justin.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about tight ends is you look in the NFL. NFL is still getting tight ends to a traditional tight end. The tight end position, of course, they're better pass catcher than they were years ago, but they still are called on to block. NFL teams still want all-around tight ends, and Nick Saban talks about it a lot. But one thing I've seen covering recruiting, a lot of high school teams are sort of pulling away from that. They have, like you said, Amari Niblack, he played wide receiver basically his entire senior season. I just think that is really interesting that specifically at the high school football level, it seems more and more teams are putting their tight ends at wide receiver, and just looking at the college football game and the NFL game, it's still tight end is still a traditional position in a way.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing because even in the NFL, when you look at rookies that get drafted, they really take like a year or two in the league to actually make a serious impact, whether it's through the air. Because in order for them to get on the field, they got to be able to block. And like you mentioned, a lot of these high schools are playing these guys as just wide receivers. And once they get to college, they have those tight end frames, but they need to add that weight and learn how to block. And that might just be what's happening right now. And I think, Amari Niblack, he has so much time to go. So I think expect him to make an impact on the field, I would say, in the future.
If you look at this game, guys, Alabama did have 5 or 6 sacks against Mississippi State, but Will Anderson, I don't know if he recorded a sack in this game. I think he did. Either he recorded a sack or he shared a sack in this game. So his impact there was felt. a little bit, not as much as it was felt, last season when Alabama took on Mississippi State. But going into LSU, Ole Miss, and Auburn, I mean, Pat Anderson's got to understand there's got to turn it up here in these next 3 games for Will Anderson.
Yeah, no, Will Anderson's definitely. I thought he actually had a pretty good game. On Saturday. I know he recorded 1 sack, but I think he had about 5 or 6 pressures on the day, and sometimes those are better measurements of pass rushers' impact. So, but in general, Alabama, I think Pete Golding's doing a pretty decent job getting pressure on the quarterback, whether that's through blitzes or just using Anderson as a distraction. So I think it'll probably work itself out. He's one of the best defensive players in college football. So I'm sure he's going to rev things up here down the stretch to try to get Bama to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think on Will Anderson definitely played a little bit better than he played against Tennessee. At least he was a little bit more impactful. I think that had something to do with them dialing up the blitzes. He was not rushing from the edge a lot, especially not standing up. It seemed to be more of an interior rush for him a lot. I think that just goes along.
He had a hand in the dirt as a defensive end quite a number of times.
Yeah. So he definitely is continuing to get a lot of attention. But yeah, I thought he played pretty solid. Like you said, got a lot of quarterback pressures. I think now we're slowly, and we just continue to see Alabama outside that Tennessee game just make some adjustments to get him an opportunity to rush the passer. Like we seen in that Mississippi State game. I think it was like a couple of plays in particular. Whenever he made a play, it was when he's one-on-one. Like he's getting double team a lot. You do not leave this guy one-on-one. You leave him one-on-one, you're asking for him to basically break up the play and wreck the play. So he did make some plays last night, but like we've seen all this season. And like I always say, if I'm going against Alabama, I'm going to account for 31 every play. That's just part of my game plan. And that's what I should do if I want to compete against Alabama and have some success on the offensive side of the football. Yeah. So I think he flashed, definitely had a better game this past weekend.
Yeah, and I think it also with the defensive line rotation, I think he probably had to play a little bit different of a role when Alabama only had, 1 true defensive lineman or 2 true defensive linemen on the field at once. He's probably the guy, like Steven, you said, you noticed he had his hand in the dirt quite a bit. So he's probably playing a little bit different of a role, a lot more interior rushes than on the edge. But, when he was on the edge and one-on-one, he was getting back there no problem. So all prayers to anyone who wants to leave Will Anderson on an island with 1 tackle. So, I expect him to have that strong finish to the year.
The other Will, in terms of special teams, Will Riker had a bounce back game. 3 made field goals, including a 50-yarder that would have probably been good from 60 yards out. So the ball is bending better here for Riker after a tough go of these last couple of games, whether it was against Tennessee or Texas A&M. So big ups there to one Will Riker. But as always, people, if you can't catch us here at the BAMA Elite Touchdown Alabama magazine every Thursday and Sunday here on YouTube, then you got to check out the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream for the best college football coverage around the South here. Also, our guys at Prize Picks, Pat, they are just doing phenomenal in terms of fantasy sports. What they got for us, man?
So at Prize Picks, all first-time users that deposit and use our promo code will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100 back. Prize Picks is the best way to have action on the game in states like California, Florida, Texas, Georgia, and over 70% of the United States. Prize Picks is currently operational over 30 states and Canada. So how does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they go out and score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. At Prize Picks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's and women's college basketball, soccer, WA, esports, NASCAR, and more. Prize Picks entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Download Prize Picks today and play daily fantasy sports with us. Make sure to use our promo code BAMA100, again, BAMA100, when you sign up.
Absolutely. The guys at Prize Picks do an unbelievable job of providing the fun and entertainment there from the sporting aspect. But guys, Crimson Tide, bye week. a chance to heal up, a chance to get some players back healthy, a chance to look at, even starting to prepare some for LSU, a team that, first-year head coach and Brian Kelly, a new quarterback in Jayden Daniels, Keyshawn Butte is still there. And, LSU has had some ups and some downs, but I think they did come out with the win against Ole Miss. Correct me if I'm wrong. They did. Did they beat the Rebels?
No, they did. Yeah, no, they've been playing much, much better since that first week against Florida State. And even then, that really was an insane finish. And their only other loss was to Tennessee. So LSU, they're much better than they've looked in week one. And they're playing good at the right time. Jayden Daniels is a different type of quarterback. He's going to be someone who can keep plays alive. So it's going to be a tall task for Alabama when they go to LSU, and it's one of the hardest environments to play in all of college football.
Death Valley Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a tough venue. I mean, I was there in 2018 where Alabama won that game 29-0. That's still tough venue to play at. But Justin, you were about to lead with something. What were you going to say there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, basically what Pat was basically talking about, how Jayden Daniels has definitely continued to get better for LSU. Definitely made some plays with his feet against Ole Miss. Looked really good. I think he's a bit of an unpredictable quarterback to defend. So yeah, I think there'll be another good test for Alabama, specifically their secondary, as they continue to try to get better, as they continue to try to close out things on a tough SEC slate. And just LSU is just one of those programs. No matter what, they still are going to be solid. They're never just really, really bad. They're just they're at least above average most times. And I think they are definitely looking a lot better now.
So here we go, guys. Before we wrap things up here, the question that to start the show off was this a bounce back win for Alabama over Mississippi State? And you got a lot of fans going, no, just a regular win. The bounce back win would be if Alabama wins the SEC championship, or a bounce back win would be if Alabama wins a college football playoff national championship. Some people are not looking at this Mississippi State game as a bounce back victory. So Pat, I'm going to throw this to you first. When you look at this, based on what happened with Tennessee, when you look at this, do you see this as a bounce back win for Alabama or no?
Well, I think the fallout and reaction to that Tennessee loss was a little bit too extreme. And partly because I think Tennessee's actually a really good team. And Alabama took a game-winning field goal and 17 Alabama penalties on the road for Tennessee to win that game for the first time in 15 years. So I'm not sure. The sky wasn't exactly falling in the first place to me when Alabama lost that game. And also, I think Tennessee's really good. But, Alabama wasn't completely as dominant, I don't think, as the fan base would have wanted, because when you look at last year, they blew Mississippi State out 59-0 and restored all sorts of confidence in the fan base. And I still think that this team has some things to clean up on. I think the bye week actually comes at a pretty good time for Alabama.
Yeah, it's hard to say if it's a bounce back win or not. I think the defense definitely played better. I think we have to see them go up against a team who's really willing to stretch the football down the field, because I thought that was what Mississippi State was going to do in this matchup. If I was Mike Leach, hey, they got beat down the field. We're going to create us some matchup to test their safeties deep down the field again. Those guys did not get tested this week. Of course, Alabama did a great job of dialing up the pressure and everything. So yeah, I think moving forward, I think like a lot of Alabama fans, I think once we see Alabama go up against another team, specifically on the defense side of football, who have success and have the weapons outside who can make Alabama sweat down the field, I think we can then make that statement that it is a bounce back win. And also, as a whole, I don't think we can call it a bounce back win either, because looking at Alabama's offensive performance, how they stalled out and how plays were basically made off script, I do feel it was a solid win, a nice win for Alabama to gain some confidence. I think, if anything, their players do have some confidence in themselves. And I think, like I said, confidence is very important. But I don't think it was a full bounce back. But Alabama did get some good things. I think it is a confidence builder for them.
Absolutely. Well, folks, this is going to do it here on the recap show, the BAMA Elite Touchdown Alabama Magazine, right here on YouTube, recapping the Alabama-Mississippi State game, things we took, things we learned, things we saw, providing some injury updates there on a few players. Was this a bounce back win? Was it not? Got all of your answers there right here on the show. Bama going into the bye week. Will take on LSU on Saturday, November 5th at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge. For all of us here at TDA, for Justin Smith and Patrick Dowd, I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith. You've been listening to the Bama Elite. See you next time, people.